before we started recording, you even made a great point of how we even speak. Like, I just have, you know, drugs and alcohol as if they're two separate things.
Yeah.
You said it's like saying apple and fruit, you know.
Yeah, it's just a pointless distinction. So alcohol is a drug.
It's so weird. Again, it's in behaviours and attitudes, isn't it? Why we can say alcohol and drugs.
Yeah. So anybody that asks me how we can change this situation, my first response is we need to go and revisit these drug policies. Drug prohibition does not work. And
it doesn't,
drug prohibition actually fuels county lines and fuels the violence that we see at the minute. So really, the first thing to do is decriminalise drugs, and then really radically, some people won't like me for saying this either, is to legalise drugs and really change attitudes towards the people that use them, the people that depend on them, and look at why people depend on them. So a really interesting statistic is 90% of all illicit drug use is not problematic. Only around 10% of illicit drug use, or drugs that are illegal, 10% is problematic. But we are made to believe that 10% accounts for 100% of people that use those drugs, right?
Go on, mate.
I was going to say, that is interesting, because you just assume that you're anyone with a drug problem or taking drugs all of the time and involved in crime, or, you know, doing things they shouldn't be. It's down to drugs, where you then lose fact that there's 90% of drug takers who are just, I don't know, happily maybe
responsible people that can make their own decisions and stop when they don't want any more and take them when they feel like having them. And 90% of people, and I would advise anybody who is interested in this to have a read of Professor Carl Hart's book. So he is a professor, I think, at the University of Columbia in America, and he is a heroin user, and he's out and proud about it. He's done a lot of research into it. And
he's an open heroin user now?
Yeah, works for a University of Columbia.
That's insane.
Wow.
Professor of psychology, I think maybe even runs the Department of Psychology in that university, and he is a heroin user, and he actively discusses his heroin and other Class A drug use.
Grace, what's his name again? I'm going to have to...
Professor Carl Hart, C-A-R, is it?
Carl Hart, yeah?
Yeah, that's the one.
And he functions okay, and he's
absolutely fine. In fact, he's done a Joe Rogan podcast, so have a listen. He will say that his performance when he is on drugs sometimes is much better than when he's not on drugs. So he said in this interview in his podcast with Joe Rogan that when he did his TED talk, he'd actually had, I think it was methamphetamine the night before.
I mean, meth is a heavy fucking drug, isn't it? I always think of people like...
I mean, is he going as far as kind of advocating it and, you know...
Yeah, he's trying to change drug laws. He is basically advocating for the fact that people should be free to make those decisions about whether they take drugs or not.
So it said, I mean, there's the thing, it says, it's great to take MDMA with my wife and reconnect. So this guy doesn't mess about with his... So
his book is called Drug Use for Grown-Ups.
Beneath the social and moral debate, it is vital scientific question: are recreational drugs harmful in themselves? If skunk, MDMA, cocaine and heroin are dangerous to the individual and ruinous to the community at large, then the case for banning them is strengthened. But what if they aren't as harmful as the authorities maintain? And what if the damage done to communities should be attributed to poverty and criminalisation of drugs rather than psychoactive effects?
Yeah, so this is really interesting. So everything that we are led to believe about addiction is wrong, and again I'm going to try and ask you to pull up another book because people need to read it. It's called Chasing the Scream.
Chasing the Scream.
And this was written by a guy called Johan Ari, I think that's how you say his name. He's done a Joe Rogan podcast.
Yeah, it is, it's a tough one.
And his whole message of that book is the opposite of addiction is connection. And basically everything that we know or we've come to know about addiction is wrong. So obviously there are certainly chemical hooks in the drugs, but actually the environment plays a huge factor. And one thing I think is really interesting, we were having this conversation the other day, when you got blown up and you were in the hospital, did you have morphine?
Yeah.
And then did you come out of hospital addicted to morphine?
No.
Why?
I don't know.
It's hard to get in Bootle, is it?
Well, yeah. No one was offering it to me. No,
Very,
it wasn't
very easy
there.
to get in Bootle, you know.
Really? Morphine.
Well, it's heroin, isn't it?
Oh right, yeah.
So you know, if you go to the hospital, you're given diamorphine, which is the medical term for heroin. Morphine is the exact same. It's much more pure and it's much more safe because it's not bashed with anything that you find on the street.
Yeah, no, I just wasn't addicted. I don't know. I had other things going on, I guess.
Other things going on. You had a support network in place. You know, you had all the qualities and factors that somebody needs to live a fulfilling life.
A nice life,
right?
yeah.
So you didn't become addicted to that. So why then, if the chemical hook is there, it's the same. If we're led to believe that these drugs are so chemically addictive, why then would you not walk out of the hospital with a heroin addiction? Why would you then not want to go and find a drug dealer on the street and get some heroin? And it's the same, you know.
So fulfillment and connection.
Yeah.
Is the answer.
Yeah. So as well as the physiological needs that we have, you know, in terms of needing to eat, needing to sleep, and everything else that goes with that, we have psychological motivations. To be respected, to have an identity, to feel fulfilled, to feel loved. A lot of people who become addicted to drugs don't have those needs met. And instead of forming connections with people, they form connections with drugs. And the drugs become, you know, people will say that heroin feels like you're being wrapped up in cotton wool.
Yeah,
that it takes all your stress away, that you're just fine for as long as you're on it.
Maybe it's not the same in the sense that the point I'm going to make, but what I think's funny is my dad smokes, and sometimes I don't know, I'd have to ask him, but I don't think it's sometimes the nicotine, it's sometimes just something in your habit, and it's that habit, of, I remember people who would, you know, when it come to smoking outside, you'd go outside to speak to other people, that connection.
There's a real social aspect to it.
Yeah.
So this is really interesting. So in the 80s, when nicotine patches came out, there was a huge optimism in people obviously stopping smoking. In that nicotine patch, you've obviously got the nicotine, so you've got the chemical hook, you're still receiving that. Only around 17% of smokers stop smoking with those nicotine patches. But if you're still getting that chemical hook,
you're smoking to get that.
You're getting that.
So
what's happening to the other 70, 80% who are still addicted? So why? So there's other things in the environment.
Of course, yeah.
There's that physical habit. You know, you might associate having a smoke when you're driving to work or when you're coming home from work.
Yeah.
You know, I know people who only have 2 cigarettes a day, and that will be when they've just come home from work.
Yeah. My mum's the same as that. My mum does that. Yeah. Funny enough, I need to start getting out of this habit, but I've formed a habit. Whenever I'm cooking at night, I'll always have 2-3 beers. And I'm not worried, because like people are going to, what the fuck's it? What's he on about here? But every night, I'm like, I'll start cooking, and I'm like, do you know what? There's beer, and there's always beers in the fridge. And I'm like, and I've done it for like, I don't know, 3-4 weeks straight, every single night when I'm cooking. I'm like thinking to myself, right, I should really not, like, I should park.
Anonymous getting caught next time.
Yeah.
Because it is so easy. With cooking, it sounds mad, but
my dad was the same though. When my granddad was an alcoholic, and my dad's seen that firsthand, so he always vowed after he passed away he'd never have beer in the house for that exact reason, because it's there.
Because it's there.
It's so easy to have if it's there, isn't it?
And I don't get fucked up. I'm not zapped every single night, like trying to, like, you know, cook, but
set your house on fire. This is a fart. What was the story, Grace, about the rats and the with the water? Was it?
Yeah. So this can be found in this book, Chasing the Scream. So I'm not taking credit for this at all, but it is so interesting. So I think, you know, traditionally the reason why that we've got the views that we have is a lot of these studies have been done on rats, and I don't know who it was. There was scientists who basically created a cage and put a rat in a cage, and there was 2 water bottles. So there was one water bottle that was just water, and there was one with water and cocaine inside.
Oh, yeah. Remember this. Every
single time that rat who's in this cage on its own would go to that water bottle and drink the cocaine, and within probably 2-3 weeks they'd die.
Yeah, just until they die.
Until they die. So, you know, because of that study, we were then led to believe that, these drugs are so bad, if you take heroin you're going to die in a few weeks and this will happen.
Sorry, heroin or cocaine?
Cocaine, but it can be related to other drugs, other addictive drugs. It's all about addiction. So then a scientist called Bruce Alexander came along in the 80s to kind of challenge this thinking that we've got, and was kind of like, well, hang on, you've put this rat in an empty cage on its own with nothing that would be fulfilling for it. Of course it's going to drink the one with cocaine. So what he did is he developed this study where he basically created this rat park, and he put everything in this cage that a rat would want. So loads of cheese, other rats that he could have relationships with, the little assault courses
like
that
the
he
assault
can do,
course, yeah.
everything that a rat would want, right? And they put the bottles of water, again, one with cocaine in it. They might have tried that bottle of water with the cocaine, but they never went back to it, and they never became addicted, and they didn't die. So why?
Yeah, it's interesting.
Because they had good stuff going on in their life.
Everything else that they would need.
That's fascinating. I do remember that rat thing. I think I mentioned it to Lee Butler when he was on the podcast about the cocaine, but I never heard the other side of the story.
So
with the assault course, rats flying about on the assault course.
Well, if they've got a good life, why? Yeah.
So how can that be translated to people?
Yeah, exactly. And again,
it's a good point. Yeah, really good point.
I've never been in that situation, but if I was homeless and I were, had fuck all going on in my life, no family, no friends, nothing to look forward to apart from this little drug, I mean, are you really going to judge me for wanting to have a go because I've got nothing else going on?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, problematic drug use really is just masking pain, and you have to look at why people are in pain.
Neil Wood said exactly the same.
Yeah,
exactly
the
same.
Especially with heroin users.
Why is it then? You know what I don't understand? Why aren't the government? What are the we've just heard that drugs, people in prisons, costing 36 grand a year. The problems that are going on with drugs, the vulnerable people getting exploited, everything like that. The benefits would be you could tax these drugs. Why are they still illegal? Where's the benefit?
But a lot of people benefit from the drug war.
As in governments?
As in governments, as in researchers, as in police, other agencies. A lot of people benefit from the drug war. But I think really it's the attitude that we've got in society. It's because people, like yourself, you've just admitted that had you not sought out this information, you would have been one of them people that's kind of like, oh, that would never happen to me, or I could never be in this situation. As a society, we hold that view, and we dehumanise people, and we want justice, and we want to see that somebody is paying for what they've done. Now, the only way, really, I think, one of the main ways that we can change drug laws is to educate people on this, because politicians will only seek to implement the policies that the public are in support of, right? So, for example, if you had a new government that were wanting to come in who were really looking to be soft on crime, that does not go down well. And that's why every time a new government comes in, we have tougher laws, tougher drug laws, sentences increase instead of decrease. They want to look tough on crime because that wins votes.